Aljaž Fabula Festival. It sounds rather wonderful as a fabulous festival. Is that what it's meant to mean?
Yes, exactly. Basically, it started as a festival of short stories and prose. Now it's already the biggest literary event in Slovenia and wider region.
I always think of Slovenia as being one of those small countries. I mean, it's the same size as Wales and the same population that has a very strong literary tradition, much stronger than perhaps its size would suggest.
It is true, we actually consider ourselves as a nation of poets, even though we create both poetry and prose. And comparing to, of course, how many inhabitants Slovenia has, it has a really big literary activities. So a lot of festivals are taking place, some with a really long traditions, such as, for example, the international festival Vilenica, which was really, really important, especially for the past when in Europe we still had the Iron Border. For example, two newer festivals, for example, festival days of poetry and wine, concentrated to poetry, and then of course Fabula, which is concentrated around prose and also many, many other sub-programs.
Well, as a poet in a festival of poetry and wine, I might concentrate on the wine. You never know. I do remember 30 odd years ago when Slovenia became independent for the first time in the end of the 20th century, that when I hosted a group of poets in London from Slovenia, most of them were in the government or writing the constitution. So that's rare for a country.
True. Basically, in the past and already to this day, our PEN organization and also Writers Union of Slovenia is really, really important part of the society. They're still basically the advocates for freedom, the freedom of speech, written and spoken, and they're always vocal when it comes to any kind of problems we are dealing in politics and society.
And I know in Ljubljana you have that lovely writer's house right at the center of the town, which is something that I think many countries would really envy you having.
Yeah, exactly. The Writers' Villa, as we call it nowadays, and it is home to many organizations, from the Writers' Union of Slovenia to the Association for Slovene Literary Translators to Pen Center Slovenia. And it has a marvelous pen restaurant on the top and a lovely garden where during summer and spring, a lot of literary activities from reading to round tables are organized.
And the thing about Fabula Fest, of course, if it just concentrated on the Slovene language, it might be slightly insular, put it that way, because Slovene is a fine language, but not spoken by a vast number of people. Your festival is much wider than that, isn't it? It's much more a world literature festival.
Exactly. We also basically the full title is World Literature Festival Fabula. Indeed, Slovene is a small language, around 2 million speakers. Even though we are really, really proud of it, we also say that it's the most grammatical language in the world because beside singular and plural form, it also knows dual, which is always a really strange thing when it comes to translating. A lot of our love poems, the meaning is lost in English and other bigger world languages. But when it comes to Fabula, our main focus are, of course, big international literary stars that are coming each year to Slovenia and presenting their works in Slovene translation. Of course, we are not forgetting also our domestical authors. Especially in the last 4 or 5 years, we established a special sub-program called Fabula Selects, in cooperation with the Association of Slovene Literary Critic. Each year, the curators are selecting the best prose works of the last 2 years, and Slovene authors are then presented all around the country in selected libraries.
I see so many parallels with how Wales treats its language and how it spreads its writers around the country as well. It's very closely related. And I think again, it's something you can do in small countries because it's a contained space. You don't only happen as a festival in Ljubljana, do you?
No, our activities is basically placed into different cities around Slovenia, especially from this year on, when we are working much more on decentralization of Slovene culture. Fabula was home before only Ljubljana with activities in other cities. But from this year on, we are adding another home to the portfolio of homes, if I may say so. So the main program will happen both in the city of Celje and Ljubljana, with activities happening in the second biggest city of Slovenia, Maribor, and many, many other cities. As you said, Slovenia is small, but even though we are small, we are facing, as many other European countries and countries of the rest of the world, with the centralization of culture to the capital. So we want to a bit disturb this chain, and in order to share reading culture, also invite different cities in collaboration and celebration of literature.
And the thing about your literature in Slovenia is that although, as we said, it's quite a compact country, you've still got regions which reflect the cultures that they are close to. So Maribor is much closer to Hungarian culture. Perhaps up in Bled, you're closer to the Alpine Austrian side, and then in Nova Gorica, yes, capital of culture, you're right up against the Italian border, and that bleeding over, if you like, of literary influence from Trieste is there. How do you reflect that sort of extraordinary spread of being part of that nexus of crossroads of old Roman Pannonia in your programs?
Well, indeed, Slovenia is really diverse. Basically, only if we speak about Slovene language, even though only 2 million speakers, we have 46 official recognized dialects. So imagine what does this do for the poetry and prose creation. And indeed, we are really in the center of different cultures, everything from Roman Empire to Austro-Hungarian Empire and forgotten idea of Middle Europa, for example, and of course, direct connection to Balkan. So we always refer to us in many, many cases as a happy mix of different cultures and languages. This, of course, is also reflected in Fabula, both with the domestical authors that are being presented on the festival each year, but also with the Croatian project that each year Fabula selects 5 to 6 international names. And we are really, really careful that we do the same quota both for when it comes to gender, but also the representation of different languages and cultures, both with like established writers to emerging writers as well.
How close, just for those of us who are not Balkan in ourselves, how close is Slovene and Croatian to each other?
Well, depends who you ask if I reply completely truthful. Slovenes will understand in most cases both Croatian and Serbians, while it's not vice versa. The situation is, and I have no idea why, most of the Croatian and Serbians do not understand Slovenes. I remember when I was still a student of Faculty of Arts in Ljubljana, we had the conference of comparative literature in Zagreb. And all the languages of ex-Yugoslavia were working languages. So I was presenting the Central European avant-garde and merging with the Balkan avant-garde in Slovene language. And people after it asked me in which language I was speaking. So this is just like maybe a funny anecdote, but it is true. In a way, it is similar, but it is also really, really different.
I think
So
it
you can
reflects
also see some traces, for example, with the Northern Slavic languages, much easier, especially with Czech.
That's interesting too. Yes, I suppose in a way it reflects the way that the English cannot understand the Scots half the time, but it's very similar. Aljaž, you're a very active young writer yourself. I know that with PEN International, which is the great organization been going for the last 100 years or so, that defends freedom of speech and speaks up on behalf of those writers who are imprisoned or under threat. You're starting a young writers group in PEN International for the first time in our 100-year history.
Exactly. And a funny fact, I just finished a meeting before our interview with the young committee. We are now basically forming each other all around the globe to different sections, everything from literature to mentorship program. And we are forming small groups in order to find the activities that are necessary and are also addressing young writers and also young audiences, so that we are all ready for the next Congress that is happening in 7 months' time.
And how do you define young for your group?
Well, when we started the formation, I was a big advocate that we should avoid ageism, because this is also a really huge thing when it comes to literature. A lot of focus is put on emerging young writers, and of course this definition is really different from country to national literature to national literature. Some would say that the young author is up to 45 years old. Others will say a young author can also be of the later period, maybe in 50s or 60s, if they just published the first work. So it's a hard definition how to basically define young author. But we are avoiding this. And even though, of course, in our group, mostly there are young voices when it comes comparing to the age, we will, for example, also establish a different mentorship program, because we do want to do all our activities as intergenerational cooperation.
Now, I think even at the best definition, I can't quite qualify, but still, I would like to think that one day I might revert to being a young writer. What do you write yourself? What's your own genre? Are you a poet, a novelist?
I'm a poet only.
And how would you describe your poetry? Are they very long? Are they quite short? Are they very political?
Well, for me, it's really hard to talk about my own poetry, but like, for example, critics, especially in Slovenia, said that my poetry is quite diverse. It goes really from really, really deeply personal, intimistical situations. For example, I wrote a lot of poems about Alzheimer's disease and dementia that affected our family with my grandmother, who became quite famous in European space because of these poems. And on other situation, of course, also really, I'm always addressing political changes and also problems that we are facing in society. In my first poetry collection, for example, while I was on the residency in Greece, I was in direct contact with the refugee, with the first migration wave, and it deeply affected me. So I was writing a lot about migration, about double face as European Union is to this theme, about war. So it really differs. And also when it comes to structure, I use different kind of structures. I write both in really prose form, like prose poetry, to really lyrical ones. And especially in the first poetry collection, I also used a lot of statistical data, because the main idea was that lyrical subject is basically being built as a body. A lot of the theme was about body, exception of the body in the society. And then also the end of the collection was decompensation of or destruction of that body.
One thinks of statistics and poetry as being exactly the opposite to each other. Aljaž, let's go back to Fabula Fest. When does it take place?
Every year when the spring comes in Slovenia, also Fabula brings word and domestic literature together. So this means every year in March, and our festival usually lasts from 3 to 4 weeks, so the entire month.
That's lovely. And just a little bit more about perhaps why. I mean, there are not many literature festivals in the European Festivals Association, and it started as a music festival, there's now many more theatre and film festivals. But I wondered what it was that Fabula Festival felt was going to be helpful both to itself, but also what it could contribute to the European Festivals Association.
Well, the thing is, like, even though we are a literature festival, we also combine different art genres. For example, we have a special sub-program called Fabula outside of literature. We each year collaborate with Slovene theaters. Each our literary evenings are accompanied by the interpretation from Slovenian drama actors. We collaborate each year with the Academy for Film. So all the books of Fabula's authors are also presented in a file of, like, basically a short film movie. To also illustration, we are really putting a lot of effort on the book illustration. So each year we select a different, especially emerging designer, and we create a special exhibition for him, her, or them. To music and dance, for example, especially this year, we will conclude our project, or I mean festival, with the intervene of literature and dance.
Fabula Festival sounds indeed fabulous. Aljaž, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.